Alright guys, we're back in my garage for another video, and today we are going to be talking about a new aftermarket camshaft option that's coming for the A90 Supra. This is really exciting because I know a lot of you guys are like me. You're very interested in getting a cam upgrade for your car, but they seem to be really rare or hard to get access to, and a lot of times we don't get a lot of data and things like that. So we have a new company that has presented some preliminary data on their aftermarket cams that should be coming soon. And I just wanted to use this video to kind of share that data with you guys so you have an idea of what we might expect when they're officially released. So hopefully you guys find this useful. And as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create a lot of videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So the company today that we're going to be talking about is Skunk2 Racing. A lot of you guys are probably familiar with them if you're coming from the JDM world. They make a lot of parts, especially for Hondas, like intake manifolds, exhaust manifolds, valve covers, and things like that. But they also make aftermarket camshafts. So they have a lot of experience with this kind of technology. Unfortunately, with BMWs, it's a lot more rare, and we don't see a lot of companies trying to make cams. Really just German cars in general. We see a lot of cams for like American muscle cars and JDM cars. But I think that now that the Toyota Supra is using a BMW engine, it kind of motivated some of these companies to investigate if a camshaft option would be worth it. So Skunk2 is definitely throwing their hat into the ring. It looks like back in early 2021, they originally shared their first image on their social media showing that they had a Supra cylinder head on their bench ready for some R&D. So I imagine they started using some time to kind of scan the head, figure out how much space they had and see how everything worked, and then come up with different solutions on how they can optimize how that camshaft actually works. Now, we don't see a lot of updates from them. You know, every couple months they would post another picture showing a little more progress on their R&D or talking about some developments that they had made. And most recently, last year in the fall, they posted an image of these sample cams that were being sent out to Chris Miller Racing for testing. Now, for those of you guys that aren't familiar with Chris Miller Racing, Chris Miller is the same Chris that owns Pure Drivetrain Solutions. So I know pretty much everybody that watches these videos is very familiar with the Pure Drivetrain Solutions transmissions. So he also owns Chris Miller Racing as well as a couple other ventures. But this was kind of the avenue they went through since he's worked with them in the past in order to kind of test their cams and figure out if there were any other things they needed to do after, putting it on a dyno and things like that. So now we do actually have some dyno numbers, and this is super exciting to see. It looks like they've gone through a couple revisions of the cams, and this is where they've landed so far. So you can see initially the car was making around 460 horsepower and 440 foot-pounds of torque. And then after the cams, you see over 490 horsepower and over 470 foot-pounds of torque. So over 30 horsepower and over 30 foot-pounds of torque improvement just by installing these cams. Now there are a couple things that I see here in the notes and kind of just the dyno chart itself. The big one that should jump out at you right away is there is power and torque across the entire rev range. So it's not something that's super peaky and like a specific area of the RPMs. It's not something that you have to rev out really hard to get more power. It's adding power throughout the entire rev range, so you'll feel it whether you're down low or up top. It'll pull harder. Now, based on the notes, it does seem like they have installed both an intake and an exhaust cam. I don't know if one or the other makes a bigger difference, but most likely you'll get the best performance by combining both. And it looks like a pretty simple, like bolt-on build. I think this is an engine dyno based on just the numbers that I'm seeing. So if they're measuring, around 460 crank, that's probably with a downpipe and a tune. And then pushing 490 is, of course, a lot more power. But again, with just a downpipe, probably not something that most people would do before even like a turbo upgrade, just slapping some cams on there. But it does show the capability, even with a more modest build, of how much power you can actually add by just upgrading these cams. So now let's talk about some of the big questions that come out of this. So first of all are there any other platforms that this will fit? And it does definitely look like this is going to fit at least other TU engines. What I see from the part numbers for the B58 TU is that the cams are the same for 2-port and 6-port cylinder heads. So regardless of whether you have a 2020 Supra or a 2021 Plus, if you have an M340i, M240i, basically any of the TU engines should be able to take advantage of these cams when they are released. Now, the Gen 1 cams are different. They have different part numbers from BMW, and based on some feedback that I saw early during the R&D phase, there is something different about how they actually install and control the valve timing on our B58 engines. So they're going to do something a little bit differently just to adapt those to fit. I'm pretty sure the actual cam lobes are the same, so a lot of the geometry where it matters to us as far as making power will be pretty much the same, but they of course need to make sure that the cam is actually designed to fit our cylinder head, still be controlled, and have Vanos and everything working properly. So there will be some small changes in R&D to develop that and make sure it works for our cars as well. They also mentioned that they are working on S58 cams as well. So for all the M3, M4, X3M guys, they should be definitely keeping an eye on their social media for development on that, because they did basically say that this should be coming right around the corner after the B58 cams are done. Now, a big question also is, will these even be worth it, right? And there are a lot of unknowns with this. One big thing I do want to mention is if you're going to be using cams, one of the big goals, of course, is getting more airflow. If you have more lift with the valves, then you'll be able to get more air into the engine and have a more efficient running process, which translates to more power. But if you have more air, you're also going to need more fuel. So if you're already at the fuel limits, it's hard to say if this will net a significant improvement. Although, of course, one of the big things that controls your fuel limits is the cam itself. Your high pressure fuel pump is riding along a lobe on the cam, and if they increase the stroke of that, that should, in theory, increase the amount of volume of fuel that your high pressure fuel pump can flow. So hopefully, if this is an option that they're choosing to take advantage of, they'll be able to truly test this out, see the mechanical limits of our high pressure fuel pumps, and potentially this can increase the actual fuel limit that our cars have with just a DI only setup, which is pretty cool to think about. Another thing to consider is that this will need a highly customized tune in order to take advantage of it on our cars. So I don't think this is something that you can expect from like an off-the-shelf map. Even though in this dyno it looks like a simple stage 2 build, I wouldn't expect the stage 2 plus pro whatever cam option. Especially with these kinds of cams, you need to do a lot of fine tuning for engine start, cruising, all of the different ways that you drive your car, because the cams have control over all of that. So a lot of tables will need to be modified in order to make this work efficiently so that the car drives like stock when you're around town, but still allows you to make more power when you floor it. So just to anticipate that there will be additional costs for custom tuning as well. As far as price, it's kind of hard to say as well. It'll definitely be over $1,000. I mean, I think that's pretty safe to say. But again, if it's worth it, it's kind of up to you. You can see that these gains are pretty significant, and especially if you are just hell-bent on staying stock turbo, or you really want to stay DI only, this could potentially give you a little bit of improvement. And then, of course, on the other end of the spectrum, for people that are going to max out their turbo and they just want every bit of efficiency out of their car, shooting for 1,000 plus horsepower and things like that, this is definitely going to be a nice part to include in your cylinder head build or everything else that you're doing to make your car work well. And obviously this looks very similar to like the 2-port versus 6-port conversion dynos that we've seen. Now with these upgraded cams, again, you're seeing a whole new level of airflow, a whole new level of efficiency, and just more power everywhere. So more airflow is really hard to argue with. It's always nice to have in case you need it. You can always pull things back until you get more fuel or a bigger turbo or whatever that can truly take advantage of it. But even in these lower power ranges, seeing over 30 horsepower of improvement is pretty noticeable, right? That's something that's pretty significant, and you can grow into it as you continue to upgrade your setup. Another thing to consider is that this is going to be probably pretty expensive to install. Again, if you guys are coming from Hondas or, the world where Skunk2 typically makes parts for, the cams are still difficult, but it's not nearly as difficult as a BMW engine. We've got additional things to work around, like on the exhaust side, you've got your high pressure fuel pump stand and things like that that have to come out of the way. On the intake side, you've got your whole Valvetronic system, you've got to move the eccentric shaft out of the way and all that stuff. And on the B58, we have a very unique setup for how our timing is basically set up and locked in place. when you're installing cams. So it requires a lot of custom tools working in a very tight space because the actual timing chain is at the back of the engine. So instead of working, on the front or the side where you might be used to on other JDM cars, you're going to be working at the rear, kind of sandwiched between the transmission and the engine. That's where all the timing components are. So yeah, a lot of expensive, maybe one-time use tools will be needed if this is going to be something that you just kind of do on your personal car. Or if you take it to a shop, expect them to charge a lot of labor because it takes a lot of time to pull the valve cover and get all of those components off. So again, just something to consider. It'll be a couple $1,000s all in if you're dropping it off somewhere to get it installed. It also does sound like there could be a stage 1 and a stage 2 version. So maybe a stage 1 will be a little bit cheaper, a little bit more, under the radar. It won't provide like as significant of an improvement in horsepower, but it also should be a little bit easier to tune, a little bit better drivability and things like that. And then there should be the stage 2, which is frankly probably what most of us are really interested in. It might add a little bit of a rumble, a little more noise, a little bit of that lope that a lot of us are looking for, and of course more power. But that could also in turn require maybe raising the RPMs, doing some more fine tuning, and really just taking extra time to dial things in so that you maintain good drivability when you're just cruising around town. But yeah, I think that's all the information I have right now. So hopefully you guys find this useful. I definitely think it's nice to have multiple companies coming out with cam options so that we can have a little bit of competition, hopefully help fix some of this volume or scarcity that we're trying to deal with in the community right now. A lot of people are cash ready, especially the super guys, just waiting for something to be in stock. So hopefully when this hits the shelves, they get a nice, good amount of volume going through so people can take advantage of that if they're interested in it. And we can hopefully see more numbers out in the field. This is nice to see on an engine stand, just doing back-to-back testing. But I'm curious how it'll work when people actually tune their cars, especially with upgraded turbos and stuff. Is it something that can help raise the, high pressure fuel pump limit and things like that? We'll have to kind of see. But yeah, it's really good news just to see this initial data. In the next couple months, I think we'll see it actually fully come out. So yeah, that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below.